Are we ready, Freddie?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, thank you for being here. I'd like to call the special meeting of the City Council of the City of Marysville to order Thursday, October 10th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Buttigieg. Hudson.
Here.
Simmons.
Here.
Vice Mayor McKenzie.
Here.
And Mayor Samayoa.
Here. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Larry Vieira and Commander Brock Bowen to help us lead the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. This time, I'd like to ask our city manager if there are any changes to the agenda.
There are no changes. Well, so, yes, there are actually, right? You gonna read into the record now?
Yes.
Okay, so there is one change, sorry, to resolution regarding Highway 70, letter of support and resolution, and the city clerk will read it into the record.
For item number 2 on the consent calendar, pass a resolution as amended to read, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the City of Marysville hereby supports the request of Caltrans to utilize a portion of the SACOG's 2020 flexible funding cycle, which includes the county's 2020 STIP funding, up to $4 million to fund expanding the scope of the 3-lane safety project in District 10 portion of Yuba County to a 5-lane project, as provided on the dais.
Thank you. And those items are in front of you, council members. With that, let's move to, are there any closed session reports, sir? Mr.
All the action was taken in open session. Nothing to report.
Thank you. We'll move to proclamations and presentations. There's a couple things here. The Extra Mile Day Citizen Volunteer and Service. It's a proclamation we just want to mention. We won't read it. And we'll also F, the 108th National Day of Republic of China's sister city. Vice Mayor will be presented it on 10/7/2019 at the dinner celebration. So thank you for that, Vice Mayor. Is there someone here from the Breast Cancer Awareness Month? So given that, we will just also read that into the file. So with that, we have a few other proclamations. We'll do the Extra Mile in Action. Congratulating Alex Wachensky. And we're gonna take a picture with this mug, this ugly mug over here, and we'll bring Vice Mayor McKenzie to help us out so we can send it to the Extra Mile Foundation. So we can get Mr. Alex up here, that'd be great, and then we'll do the next one.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Good.
Why don't you come over here with us and we'll do a little something here for you. Man, I heard you helped us with Ellis Lake. So, Alex, we got you some cute ducks for helping us clean Ellis Lake. And we have this proclamation, which is something to read, so that to let you know how proud we are of you. Okay? You mind if I read it? Okay. Whereas 4-year-old Alex has displayed good citizenship by volunteering to pick up trash in the city of Marysville, especially at Ellis Lake. Whereas Alex has taken action out of concern for the health and welfare of ducks and geese of Ellis Lake. And then now you have 2 of the little ones to kind of sleep with. Whereas the city of Marysville wants to recognize and encourage individuals who generously volunteer their time and energy in serving the city. Alex's mother, Bridget, is also to be commended as a parent for raising her son in such a way as to see him develop into a citizen who is actively in his community. Alex's example of unselfish service and sincere concern for vulnerable wildlife has brought joy and inspiration to our community. We praise him for taking the initiative to solve a problem. We hope his actions inspires others to be involved and become active leaders in the city of Marysville. You can take my place soon, okay? Okay. We thank Alex's mother, Bridget, for giving her time to support him in his mission of saving the ducks from eating trash. There be a resolve that I, Ricky Samayoa, the mayor of the city of Marysville, and the city council do hereby recognize and thank Alex for helping to keep Alex Lake Park free of trash so that ducks can be safe and community members can be more fully enjoy their time in Alex Lake. Thank you, young man. Let's give him a hand of applause. Come here, Alex. I have a son whose name is Alex too, so I like that name.
And so do I.
So, buddy, we also got this award for you, signed by the Vice Mayor. This is Stephanie McKenzie, and that's me. And we appreciate you. You like the Ninja Turtles? Sweet! Good job, buddy. Come here over here, buddy. See? Help you. Good job. So we're going to send his picture to the Extra Mile Force for Citizen Volunteers of the Year. So thank you, Alex, and thank you, Mom. Okay. I need a lot of direction here. C. We'd like to present we have a proclamation supporting the Purple Heart Trail, and we have Senior Vice Commander Mr. Brock Bowen here to accept our proclamation. Sir? I'm going to read the proclamation. Whereas the National Purple Heart Trail was established in 1992 for the purpose of commemorating and honoring men and women who have been wounded or killed in combat while serving the United States Armed Forces. Whereas the National Purple Heart Trail courses its way across the vast majority of the United States, in 2001, pursuant to the State Concurrent Resolution 14, the legislature designed portions of Interstate Highway Route 5 and 80 as California selections for inclusion in the National Purple Heart Trail. And whereas in 2009, pursuant to Assembly Concurrent Resolution 12, the legislature designated a certain portion of State Highway 101 in the counties of Monterey, St. Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara for inclusion in the National Purple Heart Trail. And pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 105, the legislature designated a certain portion of State Highway 223 in the County of Kern for inclusion in the National Purple Heart Trail. And in 2013, pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 27, the legislature designated a certain portion of the State Highway 101 in counties of Santa Barbara, Ventura for inclusion in the National Purple Heart Trail. The Marysville Veterans of Foreign Wars 948 wishes to continue the Purple Heart Trail program within the city limits of the city of Marysville for State Highway 20 and 70. Now therefore be it resolved that the city of Marysville does support the endeavor of the Senior Vice Commander, Mr. Brock Bowen, who has taken the lead to bring the Purple Heart Trail through the city of Marysville. Thank you so much for your efforts, sir.
Thank you. I just have a few words on this. It's been going on for about 6 months to get to this point, and from this point forward it goes to the State Assembly, then to the Governor's desk, then to Caltrans, and we're looking at the first sign and the dedication probably in a year. So it's been a long ordeal, and the thing that's unique about this resolution is only going to be within the city limits of Marysville.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. There's gentlemen right there, District 3 Caltrans. You can go talk to them. Yeah, there you go. Small world. We have Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Ms. Marsha Cross-Taylor, if you can please come up. I think I got this right. I might just be totally wrong, but we'll go with this one. Does that sound okay? Thank you, Marsha. I'd like to give you this proclamation on behalf of the City of Marysville, declaring the month of October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Marysville. Whereas the crime of domestic violence violates an individual's privacy, dignity, security, and humanity due to the systematic use of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological, and economic control and or abuse. And domestic violence leaves an imprint of fear and hostility. The problems of domestic violence are not confined to any group or groups of people, but across economic, racial, affectional preferences, social barriers, thereby affecting society as a whole. In the City of Marysville, adults and children are victims of violence each year. And the Marysville City Council is committed to restoring the rights to freedom from fear in our own homes. The Marysville City Council is committed to restoring the rights to freedom from fear in our communities. In our quest to impose sanctions on those who break the law by perpetrating violence, we must also meet the needs of victims of domestic violence and their children who often suffer grave financial, physical, and psychological losses. Now therefore be a resolve that in recognition of this important work done by domestic violence programs in cooperation with Casa de Esperanza, I, Mayor Ricky Samayo, and the City Council of the City of Marysville do hereby proclaim the month of October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Marysville. We urge all citizens, agencies, and business to work together as a team in our community through prevention, intervention, and education programs to take a stand until society has zero tolerance for domestic violence. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council persons. It's kind of a bittersweet moment for me to be here tonight to talk about this. The City of Marysville has been a long supporter of CASA, but in the last 3 years, you have hosted us. So the fire in 2016 brought us into your city, and this may be the last October that we spend housed here. Thanks to Adventist Health and you, we have had a place for the last 3 years, so you've become our home. I also want to give a special shout out to Chief Sachs and the men of his department, his officers. They have been resolute in their support of CASA, both in immediate response when we needed them, but also the compassion that they show. So the City of Marysville is our second home, and I don't think we will ever forget that. So thank you very much, and thank you for this proclamation.
Nicole, am I done? Okay, thank you. It's good to see the mayor out here. So close. Okay, we have a community consent calendar forum. Individuals wishing to address the city council concerning consent calendar items or on matters not already in the agenda are invited to make oral comments up to 3 minutes. Please fill out a speaker's card and submit it to the city clerk sitting over there, Ms. Nicole when you're called by the mayor, or by me, I guess, please go to the podium and give your name clearly for audio recording. You are requested to address your comments to the council and not to the audience, and by state law, the council is not permitted to undertake any action or discussion on any item not appearing on the agenda. Members of the public like to speak on matters of the consent agenda or matters not on the agenda?
Yes, Mayor, we have Chris Pedigo.
Chris Pedigo, 139 Olear Road. I just want to say thank you to the city manager and the city staff for fixing the street signs on Greeley. They were historically misspelled for several years, and the nice lady who lives on Greeley, who lives in Dr. Greeley's house, was very appreciative of that, and it does help restore a little bit of Marysville history. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other cards?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. With that, we'll go to consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered routine and therefore approved by one motion unless a council member first requests that a matter be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action. What's the will of the council?
Move to approve.
So motion on the floor?
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved unanimously, 5-0. Thank you. Now we'll move to discussion calendar. All matters in this section of the agenda are discussed and will be acted on individually. Members of the public may request to speak on any of these items for up to 3 minutes when you are called. Please complete a speaker's card and submit it to the city clerk and wait to be recognized by us. State your name clearly for audio recording before beginning your comments. We'll move to item 7, opportunities for collaborations and partnership between Olivehurst Public Utilities District, OPUD, Linda Fire Protection District, the City of Marysville, and Wheatland Fire Authority in an effort to improve regional public safety services delivery. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to bring forward this resolution this evening. As I think you all are aware, today and this evening is a joint and concurrent resolution being brought forward by the OPUD Board, the Linda Fire Protection District, and the Wheatland Fire Authority, in addition to the City of Marysville, to begin talks and collaboration and partnership between all 4 fire jurisdictions to discuss a variety of ways that we could start to partner better together and collaborate together, including seeking opportunities relating to joint training, purchasing, fleet maintenance, fire plan review and inspection, operational planning, and shared administration. This is the first step, and I think it's actually a historic and unprecedented step in terms of seeing how we can all work just more closely and better together. That's really all I was going to say for introductory remarks, and I think Chief Carlin maybe also has a few things he'd like to say as well about this historic event.
Thank you. I would just echo what Ms. Brown has said. It is unprecedented, and it is a trend that's happening across the fire service in California. So we're just happy to kind of get on that bandwagon and look for ways that we can collaborate and be more effective, more efficient, and being able to help each other out in those weaknesses that we currently have, which we all share independently. So we look forward to getting into the room to actually start looking at ways we can start to fix things for the future, which will take time and energy, but we're hopeful that we'll get somewhere and show some progress.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Well, I'm pretty proud of the fact that it's been going on for a long time and trying to find ways that we can work together. And Chiefs, your leadership, you saw the opening, and you kind of nudged some folks, and I appreciate that leadership you provided to this valley. So thank you for that. And I know the city manager worked really hard on her side, working with the administrators in each of their areas to kind of put something together that's going to be fruitful and helpful, and can kind of maybe be the first step towards some further efficiencies and working together, whether that's a JPA or whether that's one fire department in the valley, whatever that may look like. That'd be pretty amazing for this public. We have, for 70,000 people, I would say a county tends to be on the conservative side. We tend to have a lot of government in this place. That means that's a lot of fire districts within one county of 70,000 people. We probably can do a little better, so thank you for taking that step forward. Any comments from the public on this matter? Seeing none, any other comments from council members? Yes.
I'd like to echo what the mayor said. I'm very happy about this and the potential that we have in collaborating together and sharing resources should save everybody money and improve services. So I'm very happy. So thank you for spearheading this for us. Appreciate it.
Through the chair, I don't got much to reiterate on that. I agree with this. The potential for this could do for the community of Yuba County in general could be a phenomenal event. We got a long road ahead of us, but it is a great start, and I thank you for staff's effort, both from Chief Carlin, Ms. Brown, and all the other districts. I hope these talks go well. I hope it works well. I hope we can think about the constituents and go from there. Thank you for your work. Let's go from there.
Thank you. Any other comments, folks?
One,
Yes, sir.
just snap forward. Good job, Chief. I think you'll pull this off. Will you become not a battalion chief, or what? If you are selected for that, what position would you fill?
King?
Getting coffee,
King
dumping the
Kong?
garbage.
King Kong.
Yeah, very simple position. But I just want to echo, this would not be going anywhere without Ms. Brown and some other key players out there as stakeholders, because I had a vision and I kept softly pushing, and Ms. Brown jumped on board and has ran with it. So without her support, we would not even be here talking about this. So I appreciate the support all the way around.
I think that's what Team Marysville is all about, isn't it?
Yep.
Working as a team. You bet.
Any other comments? Mr. Hudson, would you like to make a motion to pass a resolution authorizing city management to seek opportunities for collaboration and partnership between OPUD, Linda Fire Protection, the City of Marysville, Wheatland Fire Authority in an effort to improve regional public safety service delivery?
Thank you, Mayor. I most likely would like to make a motion on said subject, as stated.
And I
Is there
will
a second?
that.
Second by the Vice Mayor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved with the vote of 5-0. Item 8, bond closure update, pension obligation bond, POB, and B Street bond. This is receive and file an update from Mr. Wolf Hansen and Company on the closures of the 2019 pension obligation bonds, POB, to pay off our current unfunded pension liability, and CalPERS, and the 2019 lease financing to refund the 2011 B Street Certificate of Participation, or COP, in the 2001 A-BAG lease revenue bond. Ms. Jasinski.
Good evening. I would like to introduce Bud Levine and Rob Pankratz, sorry, I probably messed up his name too, from Wolf and Hansen Company, who have been our municipal finance advisors throughout this bond process, and they will be giving us the presentation.
Do we have the clicker? Good evening, Council. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. I always say that as my opening statement, that it's a real pleasure to be here, but it really is a pleasure to be here tonight because we have a lot of good things to talk about as a result of completing the refunding of the B Street COPs, which I know the city has been anxious to do for a few years, and also the issuance of pension obligation bonds that have paid off your unfunded liabilities, and your unfunded liabilities now are completely paid up and you're fully funded as a result of this. Ron Pankratz, who my associate, is here tonight, and I also want to pay special thanks to your staff, to Marty, city manager, and Jennifer, and her support staff, and Brant Bortson, you did a fantastic job on the POB validation suit. We got great cooperation and work from Hilltop Securities in doing the POBs, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and a terrific job by Brandis Tolman in doing the private placement. So we made good selections, I think, on the two entities that ended up with their specialties doing the completion of the issuance of the financings. So the first thing I want to go over with you is the lease financing, the B Street COP. Now, we combined that with the 2001 ABAG bond in order to get the proper collateral to be able to issue this lease financing. Now, this particular financing was done as a private placement, and the way the private placement works is that the placement agent, Brandis Tolman, circulated a request for proposals to 15 selected banks that in consultation with us, we thought would be the most likely buyers and investors in this type of financing. I personally talked to, in the course of answering questions, 10 of those banks, and there were many that really liked the presentation and liked the deal, but they were a little concerned about the fact that some of the past operations of the city hadn't been as efficient, and that they would like to see a little bit longer period of time of consistent, good management and good participation in all the requirements of reporting on bonds, and then they would be very active buyers. Made me a little bit nervous because we didn't seem to have as many proposers as I had hoped. So there's a particular day that these RFPs are due, and it's like watching an election. We're waiting for the proposals to come in. We have a cutoff time. Now, there's one consistent bank that always bids on anything that we're involved in. They are not the most aggressive bidders, but I can pretty well count that we'll get a proposal from them. And usually it's a proposal that'll work. It's Western Alliance. And and I'll get to that slide in a minute, but you may recall that when we were making our projection for your initial approval, as to what interest rate we thought might, and we've got that up there right now, we were using 4.35%. At 4.35%, we would have produced around $1.5 million in savings, which would have been a very, very good performance. The first bid that came in was Western Alliance, and their bid was 4.26. So it was lower interest rate, but not as good a rate as I was hoping for, but it would work. And then we waited, and 5 minutes before the deadline, we got a second bid in, and it was from F&N Bank, very good bank in the Central Valley, who's recently been expanding north in their footprint. Their bid was at 3.50%, but they had a particular covenant in their bid, which was that in order to lock that rate during the period of getting all of the diligence completed to where they could sign the agreement, they wanted 1/4 point. That's 0.25%. So that brought their offer up to 3.75%. That would have produced very close to the $2 million that Mr. Mayor, you had requested. Can you possibly get that savings up to $2 million when I made my presentation last time?
I can see you did it better.
So, well, yeah, I'm getting there. I felt better at that point. 1 minute before the time period was up, we got a bid from BB&T, a terrific bank. I wasn't sure, based on my conversation, that they were going to actually bid. And their bid was 3.08. And after conversation with them before we accepted the bid, they agreed to lock the rate right then and there. That was a really terrific bid that we got. And we locked it in, and we ultimately went to a close. So what does all that mean? It means that in looking, you can see the summary, and I'll go through the rest of it in a minute. You can see in the blue on the left, those were the presentation, those are the numbers that we were using on the May 14th and then subsequently the June 4th approval that you gave for moving forward. And to cut to the chase, it was 4.35 was our estimate, and we thought that the cash flow savings would be around $1,594,000. When we came back June 4th, we had that up to $1,007,000, and I made the comment that I thought there was a very good chance we could get about $1,009,000, and that's when your mayor said, can't you get that to $2 million? And I don't really have control over that, but we certainly were trying. Here's the net result. We got a 3.08 rate. Our savings are $2,669,000 as opposed to the $1,007,000 and as opposed to the $2 million. The other thing that we always look at in these type of refundings, and it's a legal regulatory requirement, is we have to show you what the present value of those savings are and what percentage that is of the bonds you're refunding. And in this case, the present value of savings is $1,385,000. That's what the $2,006,000 that you're going to realize over a 15, 18-year period is worth in today's dollars if it were to be paid today. And under the debt management policy that we instituted last year, the rule of thumb is you want to have at least 3% in net present value savings. We always like to have between 6 and 10%. This was 20%. So all in all, I think an extremely, extremely good result. You might want to, yeah. And you can see this first slide is the breakdown. You see the interest rates up to 4.35 and the estimated savings of $1,594,000. That was at the May 14th meeting. And then the next slide will show you the results of this. And that's the 2.6. Now, Jennifer, I think, went over this at one of the meetings. There is an adjustment, and I'll show you in the next page. There is an adjustment of those savings because in order to do the 2001 ABAG bond, to refund that and to free up the collateral to be used on the bond, the financing that we did, you have a possibility that you may lose the ROPS reimbursement that you get for part of the payment on the existing 2001 bond. Well, when we ran the numbers, we realized you could easily give that up and still have fantastic earnings. And you can see that even with the adjustment, the earnings are the savings are over 2.4 million. And I understand you're going to be applying for that reimbursement. And if that comes in, then we're back to the 2.6. But worst case, you're at 2.4 plus. So the next bond that we did is the pension obligation bond, and that was with Hilltop Securities. And a couple of things I want to point out about this that you don't see obviously from the numbers, and I hadn't had a chance to really go over that with everybody. There's actually more savings buried into these numbers that you don't see right off. But to just talk about the basics, Hilltop did a very, very good job. And when we got to the point of determining from CalPERS what the actual balance of your unfunded liability would be, with the addition of the report for the year of June that reported in June 2019, which updated the unfunded.
Sorry, before you move to
Yeah.
the pension obligations,
Sure.
it's just something just popped in my mind. If the property is sold,
Are you talking about the B Street property?
yeah,
Yeah. Remember what we did at city manager's request? That's one of the reasons we did not use the B Street property as the collateral for this transaction. Even though it was refunding the bonds that were originally had that, we used the city hall and the ballpark. So as a result, that B Street property is not tied to this at all. You can sell the property, you can do anything you want with it, and the revenues from that are free to the city and aren't pledged to this deal.
oh, thank you. All right, thank you.
Sure. So when we got the update of the amount of the unfunded liability, we realized that even though CalPERS actually had a slightly positive performance for the year ending June 30th, 2018, which is the last audited year they have, there should have been a reduction in the unfunded liabilities that you had as of that date, which is the amount we originally were going to refund. It didn't work that way. In their recalculation of all of the obligations that will be involved in your fund being fully funded, there was actually an increase of $619,000. So if we did not have that number in time to factor it into the bonds that we did, we would have done the bonds and paid off what was originally shown. If you look at the next page, you'll see that from May 14th, the net proceeds of $14,135,000, that was the amount of the unfunded that we thought was going to have to be paid off. The actual amount is $15,459,000. I'm sorry, it's $14,754,000 in the new number, which is $619,000 more than what we originally were going to do. So to put that in plain English, if we had gone ahead and completed the transaction and paid off the $14,135,000 after this new report came in, you would have started next year with a new unfunded of $619,000. But because we knew it before we got to the point of actually having the bonds sold, we were able to have Hilltop price the bonds with something called a premium structure, where you actually sell a little higher coupon rate, but you get more funds in for the specific project you're using the money for. We were able to raise enough money to now pay off the unfunded that you would have had going forward. So for next year, that's all paid off in this particular financing, which was really a pleasant surprise to be able to do that. We pushed it even a little further because we had talked in consultation with Marty and Jennifer. You still had monthly payments that you were making on the unfunded for this current fiscal year, and you had about $690,000 left to go. We were able to include that in the refunding also. So everything that you owed to CalPERS all the way through June 30, 2020 and on through June 30, 2021 were paid off by this particular issuance. So it ended up being a really very positive, part of the positive result. Part of it was good work on everybody's part, but I have to be honest, part of it was luck because the market absolutely accommodated us. We ended up pricing very close to the lows of the interest rates for this year. So all in all, it produced, if you go to this page here, this shows the interest rates that were done and what the POBs were sold at. And you can see the interest rates went from a 2.37 up to a 4.16. The average interest rate for the entire bond issue was 3.75. If you'll notice, if we go back, this page here, again, May 14th, we were expecting 4.30. So we ended up being almost 60 basis points lower in yield. If you may remember, our savings estimate was $4,913,000 when we got approval. The actual savings ended up being $7,132,000. And all these other things occurred of paying up your UAL all the way up to the full amount.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to ask a question.
Sure.
These obligation bonds in this particular CalPERS, we're paying off our unfunded liability, but what happens after that? How many people are we projecting retiring in the next 10 years before this bond's paid off or whatever?
Well, it has nothing, it doesn't, it really doesn't have to do
Well, we
with
have
that.
to pay it, though.
No, because this is currently
Yeah.
what you don't have. You were $15 million unfunded for whenever they retire. Now, as of today, you're fully funded. Going forward, you'll continue to make your contributions normally to CalPERS. If there's a new unfunded liability, then you'll have to deal with how you pay that. What we did here is we were able to pay off the first year after these bonds closed, what your unfunded would have been, and we got that included in the payoff.
Because I don't want to get in the same situation we are now.
Well,
15,
yeah,
20 years
I
ago.
agree with you, but see, unfortunately, that's going to be a function of CalPERS. Right now, all you did is, before we did this, you owed $15 million paying 7% interest. Now you paid off the $15 million and you're paying 3.75% interest. That takes care of your unfunded up to this point. You now have 100% funded for where you should be for 2019 to fund your pension obligation to your retired employees when they retire. Every year, there's a new calculation of what that total should be. And if it equals if CalPERS earns enough to equal the stated amount of 7%, then you will be even all the way through. If they end up earning less than 7%, then there'll be a new unfunded. For example, if we hadn't been able to pay off the amount due for 2020 to 21 after completing this, you would have had a new unfunded of $600,000.
Yeah, that's my concern.
We paid it off. Now, we can't pay it forward, so that's going to be but you're a lot better off when you're starting from zero when you have to pay off any future unfunded than you are when you're starting from 15 million, because now you'd be 15.6, and maybe next year you'd be 17 million, and so forth. What you can do, of course, is take a look at some kind of a program to look at part of your savings and see what you do with that as part of the ability to pay off some of your future, or for whatever other use you want.
So there's a plan that can be constructed to do that very thing.
Pardon me?
There is a plan that could be constructed to allow us
Yes.
to make those payments
That's going to
prior
be
the
for you to
fact.
decide going forward, and I'll be very happy to weigh in on that if you need any help with that, with working with staff. That's correct.
I sure hate to leave a legacy that we were left with.
Well, yeah, but you know what? You're not alone.
Oh, I
mean,
know.
I'm looking at, there's a lot of cities now that are really anxious. Now that they saw this last report, we're getting calls like crazy from cities that I've talked to in the past that says, well, wait and see what happens when the 2018 numbers, because we hear CalPERS is doing great. I had one city that their total unfunded that was 50 million went up by 10%. It's now 55 million. Needless to say, I have an appointment with them in their next council meeting. So,
Thank you.
Sure.
So you want to get to the combined savings?
Yes, let's take a look at that. So your combined savings are now between the B Street COP refunding and the POB are around about 9.8 million. I really tried to get that to 10 because that was my hope, but I didn't quite get there, or the market didn't quite get there, I should say.
Well,
I think we really owe a lot of appreciation to both Hilltop Securities and to Brandis Tallman. They did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Is that the end of your presentation, sir?
Well, yeah, we have another item, I think,
Correct.
coming right up.
Yes.
But
I just want to make sure. Any questions from council members on the presentation? Do we need to make a motion to file this, receive and file? If there are comments from the public on this matter? Nicole, no. Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to receive and file the update.
Make a motion.
There's motions, is there a second? Motion and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion's approved with a vote of 5-0.
Rob, do you have anything you want to add to
That's
what
okay.
we've done so far? Okay.
Thank
I
you.
got kind of a little carried away there, didn't give you much of a chance, but, okay, I'll let.
Thank you for that presentation. I know there's folks in the video saying, wow, we saved $9 million, right? Ted? Any
Regardless, thank you.
Thank you. Number 9, sewage bond financing and refinancing. Mr. Shinsky, item 9. I'm going to say that till, I get corrected.
So again, Bud Levine with Wolf Hansen and Company is going to be presenting the documents.
Sure. What we're looking to do now, and this was all part of the rate case that you had to increase the sewer rates. You have an existing 2012 sewer bond that was not meeting its debt service covenant requirements. And so in your rate case, that increased the rates enough to bring that into compliance. In addition, you have a $2 million Linda Water District loan that was negotiated by your city manager and group. And that loan is a variable rate loan, which can be very, very uncomfortable for a city when interest rates start going up. There's no cap to it. It is based on the LAIF interest rate plus 100 basis points, plus 1%. Your current rate that you started out paying, I believe, was 3.16, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Yes. And I do know, and it's reset. It has a very unusual reset. It's reset every February, but it's based on the quarterly LAIF rate from the previous April for 1. So in February 2020, your new rate will go forward for a year based on the LAIF rate from April 1, 2019, plus 1%. Now, I do know for a fact that the LAIF rate was 2.55%. So your new rate is going to go from 316 to 355 if it's not refunded. My concern is, I've been around a long enough time to know what happens when interest rates go up. And sometimes they really go up. I can remember in 1979, 1980, when the rates were, a LAIF rate would have been about 11 or 12%, which means if that happened, you'd be paying 13%. If it goes to what the average has been over many, 20, 30 years, that rate is 5, 6, or 7%. So you'd be paying 7, 8, or 9%. Opportunity here to, once you had the rate increase that brought your 2012 sewer bonds into compliance, is to be able to issue a parity bond that part of the funds would be used to retire the Linda loan and at a much, at a low enough rate that it's probably going to be lower than what you're currently paying, but it will be fixed over the life of the loan and therefore not subject to any increases when rates start going up. Plus the fact that the Linda loan had certain covenants that would make it difficult to do other financings for the sewer enterprise. If that came up, you would be at the mercy of their approval. This way, when that's paid off, you've got a fixed rate, you've got a lower rate, and you're your own boss and determinant of what you're going to do when you want, if and when you want to issue additional bonds or any type of additional financing. So it's a very positive thing to do. In addition, we understand that Dan Bergman, who's worked with you, and your public works, that there are improvements to the sewer fund that are going to be needed. And with the interest rates being as low as they are, this would be a perfect time to issue around $4 million in bonds, $2 million of which will pay off the Linda loan, $2 million will be used for project and capital improvements. And we don't know, again, like we did before, what the rate will actually be. However, the interest rates remain very attractive and very low. I think with your approval of moving forward tonight with this resolution, and I'll get into the specifics in 1 second, we could move very quickly to get this, again, locked in and closed with the funds in place. By the way, one more thing on the Linda loan. It is fully refundable at any time from any source. Part of this, we worked with your city manager and with bond counsel also in revising, and your city attorney, in revising some of the initial terms so that we were able to do that loan, keeping in mind that you might want to refund it at some point. So you're able to do that. So the resolution tonight is going to be to approve moving forward with the financing. It's not committing you to the financing yet because we will then bring back the real proposal for your approval, hiring the team. This is exactly what we went through on the POB. The initial resolution hired the team, instructed the team to bring back a proposal that you would then consider for approval. So this would hire Wolf Hansen. We're already under master contract, but this would hire us for this specific project. Hire Quentin Timmick again as bond counsel. And my recommendation, and we discussed it with staff and with Marty, was to recommend that Brandis Tallman, because they did such a good job on the private placement, and this is probably going to be a private placement, but it could be public, but it's small enough that I wouldn't want to have split it to two different underwriters. So my recommendation is for this particular project that Brandis Tallman be hired, and they've got a proposal in, and so this resolution would hire them and then instruct the team to bring back the proposal to move forward with the actual issuance of the parity bonds.
Thank you. Questions from council members? Seeing no questions, there are public comments on this matter. Okay, seeing no public comments, what's the will of the council? We have two matters that we can take. One is to pass the resolution authorizing the appropriate city staff as read here, and it will also hire the financing team, including the municipal advisor and so on. And then two, approving the agreement with Wolf Hansen and Company for their advisory services in the amount of $37,000. And then adds Brandis Tallman's underwriter for $17,000, and Quint Timming, a bond counsel for $40,000, and disclosure counsel in the amount of $25,000. If the financing is sold as a public offering.
Can we take both of these at once, or we have to do one at a time?
We can do it all at once.
There was one item that I forgot to add.
Okay.
That I think is relevant, if I can do so now.
Yes, sir.
When Dan Bergman, your rate analyst, did the rate study, which was approved at your 218 hearing,
right,
he had a line item for what the use of the funds would be, and one of the line items was this financing, with an estimate that it would be issued after consulting with me, getting some input, that it would be around 4%, and that the debt service would be about $230,000. With the market as it is today, my estimate would be that we would be able to do better than 4%, lower than 4%, and that the debt service would probably be closer to $200,000 to $215,000, not the $230,000.
Not $135,000. Can we play with it?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I almost got my wish last time, right?
Right. We'll do our best.
All right. Any other comments from the council members?
Chair, entertain a motion.
There's a motion on the floor, as stated. Second by Mr. Barcavoli. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion is approved, the vote of 5-0. Thank you, sir.
One more thing, if I could bring up, and then I'm through, for sure. city manager had asked me to look at, because we had talked about this a while back, was there any possibility of refunding the 2011, 2012 larger sewer agreement, which looks on its face to have, higher interest rates, and it does have higher interest rates. The problem is that it's not callable right now. It's callable in 2023. There is a mechanism for doing a refunding where you escrow the amount of funds necessary to pay the previous issue until the call date, and then you call the bonds. I have done an analysis of it, and the interest rates are fairly close to where it could produce something on the order of $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which might be worthwhile to take a serious look at. We're not ready to bring that back at this point. We'll watch the market. We'll watch what's going on in the various bond issues, and if we see an opportunity that looks a little more significant, we would bring that back for your
I
consideration.
appreciate that. Thank you.
And now I am through.
Okay. I also appreciate Councilmember Buttercup-Bowling, Vice Mayor McKenzie for working as a subcommittee to kind of go through all the details with Bud, so thank you for that time as well.
Absolutely, they were terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move to public hearing. All matters in this section of the agenda are formal public hearings and will be acted on individually. We only have one, so please, we asked folks who may request to speak, please fill out a card, and you'll be asked to go to the podium. Please state your name clearly for audio recording before the beginning of the comments. Item 10 is ordinance commercial cannabis notice. Ms. Brown.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this evening, the public hearing that's before the council is in regards to an amendment for the city's current commercial cannabis activity, both Chapter 5.10 licensing and business regulation, as well as Chapter 18.67 commercial cannabis activity. Chief Sachs and I are going to present on this together, but in kind of the high-level broad strokes. If you recall, last May, we had a joint Council and Planning Commission study session. HDL presented before the council, which HDL is also the one that helped with the amendment of this cannabis ordinance. And the direction we got from the council at that time was to move forward with adding adult use and delivery in particular to the current ordinance, so that's what's before the council. There's a couple of other additions I just want to mention quickly. In addition to adult use and delivery, there's also a little bit of cleanup around making our setbacks consistent with state setbacks, as well as adding definitions to Title V. As you may recall, back in early 2017, when the cannabis ordinance was first brought to the council and approved at the council, the state really was kind of behind in terms of its process and figuring out exactly its setbacks and definitions, and the state's come a long way since then, and really has created consistent legislation which allows the city to take a look at that and try to be consistent with state law. So that's what we've tried to add to this ordinance in addition to the adult use and delivery. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chief Sachs for a little more information on the ordinance.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and honorable council members. Specifically, this is to conduct a public hearing, and upon conclusion, it would be, our recommendation is to pass a motion waiving the first reading and review an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 510, licensing and business regulations for commercial cannabis activity, for adoption on November 5th, 2019, and then also waiving the first reading and review of the ordinance amending Chapter 1867 of the commercial cannabis activity ordinance for adoption on November 5th, 2019. Having said that, staff is proposing a clarifying change to the zoning ordinance, which is on the dais before council this evening. It is one additional change from what was originally published in the packet. The land use separation provisions of the zoning code currently differentiate between the city at large and the medical arts district. Upon further review and upon considering the planning commission's discussion Staff does not believe it is necessary to have two sets of standards, one for the Medical Arts District and one for the balance of the city. Therefore, these requirements have been consolidated and will apply to the city at large, and those proposed changes are in the red strikeout format that you have on the dais on that separate sheet this evening. As council may recall, in spring of 2018, the city adopted the comprehensive changes to various municipal code chapters, including the zoning and regulatory provisions which address medical marijuana dispensaries, and also regulated the use, possession, cultivation, and sale of cannabis and cannabis-related products within the city limits. In May of this year, the Planning Commission and City held a joint workshop, like Ms. Brown indicated earlier, along with HDL's presentation. There is a brochure attached to your packet about HDL and over 150 local agencies that they currently work with on this topic. We met with HDL and prepared the revisions to the city's zoning code and regulatory chapters, which are both attached to your guys' staff report. The changes to the zoning code are amendments, whereas the changes to the regulatory chapter are specifically a repeal and replace, since it is a major rewrite of Chapter 510. The revisions were reviewed by city staff, including City Manager Marty Brown, myself, the fire chief, the finance director, and our city attorney. And the revisions to both chapters specifically include allowing for adult use of cannabis in the city limits, allowing for delivery of cannabis in the city limits, changing sections of the zoning code and regulatory chapters to be consistent with state law, including the definition of commercial cannabis activity, continuing to require a planning commission use permit for commercial cannabis activity, including commercial cultivation, manufacture, distribution, processing, transportation, delivery, or laboratory testing, and then finally allowing existing medical marijuana dispensaries which previously obtained a use permit to engage in cannabis retail sales subject to restrictions defined in the zoning ordinance, regulatory ordinance, and subject to state licensing. On September 26th of this year, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the zoning revisions before the council this evening. One person testified in support of the changes. No other testimony was received. The commission voted unanimously 6-0 to recommend approval of the amendments with some specific changes. The commission noted that the new definition of use center included the term parks and therefore have two different or two requirements for separation of commercial cannabis activity from parks and use centers were conflicting, and recommended the provisions for separation from the parks be omitted. The ordinance before you includes that change. The commission directed the definitions of various activities associated with cannabis be defined, such as cultivation, microbusiness, and testing. All those definitions are defined in the regulatory chapter 510, and the commission did not have the benefit at that time of this information when deliberating on the zoning title. Therefore, inclusion of these in the zoning title is unnecessary and not included in the amendment before the council this evening. The commission recommended that the definition of youth center include any religious facilities that have active youth programs. Staff believes it is unnecessary to single out religious facilities, as the definition of youth center provides for specifically any public or private facility that is primarily used to host recreation or social activities for minors, including but not limited to private youth membership organizations or clubs, social service, teenage club facilities. Therefore, this change has not been included in the ordinance before council this evening. This project is exempt from CEQA. The city provided notice in the Appeal Democrat and provided notice the existing medical marijuana dispensaries in town of this hearing. Staff recommends the council conduct a public hearing, and as previously stated, upon conclusion, pass a motion waiving the first reading and review an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 510, licensing and business regulations for commercial cannabis activity, for the November 5th meeting, and then also pass a motion to waive the first reading and review of ordinance amending 1867 commercial cannabis activity with the suggested changes on the dais presented this evening for adoption on November 5th, 2019. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a comment, sir. Did you just come back from vacation? Now you're sick. You can't take any more time off.
I know, right? It's all this wind. I need another vacation. I'll be happy to leave.
Okay.
No.
Hawaii is amazing.
Okay. Any questions for Chief or Ms. Brown? Okay.
A question to bring up about the, I was listening to the conversation about the youth center definition, and they asked about adding a religious facility into that. I'm just wondering about, in the future, like, we all understand what was meant in that conversation, but in the future, somebody who's looking at the ordinance at the counter and saying, looking to approve maybe another facility in a different location, in reading the way it's written, I don't think in my mind I would think, oh, a church would fall under that category. So I'm just wondering if that really would be a good thing to include in there, since they do have family and youth activities going on often at churches, and sometimes do a daycare center would be, they would have to say that, so I wouldn't say daycare, but youth activities frequently at churches. So that's what I would suggest, leaving that in there. That's how I see it, in order to avoid confusion in the future. So I don't know how you guys see that, but I don't think in reading a youth center, I would think church. So what do you think about that?
Well, is that a question? I want to go through questions to clarify.
Well, it's a question for all of us to think about it.
Okay. And we can have that discussion during discussion and comments?
Well, that's my...
I don't have an answer. Anyone have an answer
I don't know
for the Vice Mayor?
if anybody feels that way too.
But I guess, is that a question that you're making, or is it a comment? Because I like to leave the comments after we allow the public to have.
It's a question to staff, I guess.
Oh, okay.
What would be the optics on that when somebody would come saying, oh, when you're reading this one, when you think, oh, there's a church right there, would you be thinking youth? That's what I'm wondering.
I think that the staff perspective was that the current language of any public or private facility that's primarily used to host recreational social activities for minors was fairly all-encompassing, and that it wasn't necessary to call out specifically youth programs at religious facilities. And
Because that's not their primary use?
That was partly because we didn't think that their primary use is that. We also just thought that public and private facilities is all-encompassing. And then having the wording there that primarily used was important, because any facility, whether it's a religious facility or not, could have a program one night a week, once a month. And then we're getting into a conversation about, is that enough? And how long does it last? And is it temporary? So I think there was just some concern about wanting to make sure language like primarily used in public and private would cover really everything.
Okay. I didn't know what the reasoning was and the justification. Okay, thank you. I understand that.
Any other questions? If there's no questions, I'd like to open up this public hearing. Members of the public?
Yes, Mayor, first we'll be hearing from Karen Liggett, and next Katie Maple.
Karen Liggett, I'm Marysville resident, and for one, that little boy that was up there earlier, you guys might want to talk to him. You might learn something as far as being decent and trying to do things correctly. And as far as the domestic violence, pot has been a reason why that happens. And the injunction I told you guys about, I did get the research papers, and I'm almost there to file injunction papers against the city of Marysville and all pot activity. So I would like all businesses that you guys are dealing with to go ahead and be sent to my P.O. box, and I will give it to you later, and you guys have it on file. I want all names, addresses, so I could put that on the injunction papers and cease and desist paperwork, because I will be filing soon. I made it a point to do it the next day after I left here. And I also wanted to go ahead and let you know, one of your victims of pot just died. She was a homeless girl. She was doing pot. She went on to hard drugs. She died in her tent. I think Chief Sachs knows of her. And her name was Jasmine, we called her. She was a very nice girl, troubled, because she started on pot and went on to hard drugs. And now she's dead. Thanks to you guys, people like you guys that are causing this. That girl was so troubled, she wanted to commit suicide. I talked to her many a times to try to get her off the drugs. And thanks to you guys caused her death. I hope you guys are proud of that, because she was a mother. Her kids couldn't even come around her because of this. So that's one of the many victims you guys are causing in Marysville. And she's a Marysville resident, by the way. She's not coming from another city to get the pot and leave. She's lived here a long time. She deserved better. But people like you guys chose to go ahead and give her the path that she led, death. And that's one thing you guys don't do. But when you guys create victims like her, she paid the ultimate price for it, not you guys. And Bruce, I was thinking about the other day, remember when we were kids, you were talking about griping about the drug dealers in the town? You became one on city council. You were the very one that griped about it when we were growing up in school, and you became one. So now you can't gripe about it anymore. You're causing it. You're the reason why they're here. And it's sad, because I knew you growing up in school. I really thought you were going to be better than that, and knowing your family. But look what you turned out to be. The same thing that you said back in high school you didn't want to be. And it was disgusting to you and your family. What happened? It's sad. People like you that grew up with me. And it's sad you turned out like that, wanting people like Jasmine to die. I would feel ashamed of myself, Bruce. I really would. And Bill, he's been here forever. He knows the damage it causes. I'm feeling so sorry for you guys. And the Marysville residents, if they had any common sense, will get the planning commission out, as well as you guys next time, and get decent people in here that would care about Marysville and not want trash in here.
Ma'am, thank you for taking your time. Hi, Katie. Yes? Hi.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Katie Maple, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and Compliance for Perfect Union. As you know, we were the first medical cannabis dispensary to open up in the city of Marysville and have worked diligently to be good neighbors and operators. We would like to thank the leadership of the mayor and the council for creating a regulated environment for medical patients in Marysville to access safe, tested cannabis products. It is clear by just turning on the news that the black market products are leading to illness and even death. So it is more important than ever to ensure that we are working to eliminate illicit operators and create pathways for people to access tested products. To this end, we support the passage of adult use cannabis in Marysville. Not only will this help us reduce the illicit market, but it could greatly increase tax revenues for the city. Perfect Union has the largest tax-producing dispensary in Sacramento for the last 7 years. Which brings in over $500,000 per year in tax revenues alone. This has helped fund needed programs in the city, and we believe the passage of adult use in Marysville could also have a meaningful impact. We encourage you to support the passage of adult use cannabis to create a legal pathway for consumers to access tested product, reduce the illicit market, and increase tax revenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate your time. Any other public members like to speak on this matter?
No, Mayor.
So we'll close the public hearing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, sir. Sorry, I didn't see you. John? Is that John? I can't tell. There he is. Johnny?
Sorry, I got here late, so I didn't get a chance to sign up. But Honorable Mayor and members of the council and city staff, my name is Johnny Burke. I'm a resident here in Marysville. I just wanted to say that I don't know if you guys are going to make any action tonight or if it's going to go to the next council meeting, but the appeal put in that this would happen. It was only a couple days ago, so not a lot of people have had a chance to try and schedule to be here to make comments. I'm opposed to the recreational marijuana use. I spoke against medicinal a few years ago when we debated that. At the time, I was against medicinal mostly because my personal experience has been a lot of people were misusing medicinal at that time. Since then, it's become legal recreational. I'm not opposed to the medicinal ones anymore because that makes sense to me. But just because California has legalized it doesn't mean that we have to go along trying to chase after the tax dollars. I don't think it's a very good idea for our community to do that. Twice in the last 4 years, we've had things come up that we've had the opportunity to vote upon that had to do with marijuana in both Marysville and Yuba, and both times the voters said no to those. I think it's important to realize that this community is not necessarily pro-marijuana just because the state of California is. If you look in the places like the South and things like that, obviously alcohol's been legal for a long time, but they're still dry counties. There's no reason we couldn't be a dry city as far as recreational use. I'm not opposed to shutting down the current medicinal clinics, but I don't think they should be opened up toward recreational. I think it's going to open us up to a myriad of other problems. I think one of the problems law enforcement has right now is that if someone's high on the road, we don't have a roadside sobriety test besides the normal FSTs. We don't have a way for them to do a simple THC test. They're testing some right now, but they haven't been approved yet, and they're not going to hold up in court. And I'm afraid that if we open up for recreational, we're going to open up a lot more use in our area, which will roll into underage use, and will also roll into people who will be on the roadways. So I think that we should consider that. The other thing I wanted to mention was Stephanie McKenzie, Vice Mayor McKenzie, raised a good point. I believe the Planning Commission was trying to emphasize churches that have youth programs, not solely dedicated facilities. Most youth programs only meet once a week or once every couple weeks, depending on the size of the church. So I think that the terminology the Planning Commission used was very appropriate, that they said religious institutions that have different activities like that. So I do agree with the original terminology rather than the advised. And so those are just some thoughts. I think I represent a lot of people who feel the same way. And like I said, I know it's legal in California, but that doesn't mean we need to do what California is doing. So I appreciate you listening to my comments, and I thank you for your service for our community.
Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it. Any other comments from the public? If you can fill out a card, John, that'd be helpful. Thank you so much. Seeing no more comments from the public, we'll close the public hearing. I just want to clarify, City of Marysville did pass Measure F that allows us to tax the cannabis business. So, and that passed by 62% of our residents voted for us to be able to tax cannabis related goods. So I'm not sure what John was talking about, the vote that we took here, but in Marysville, we voted to tax cannabis business by 62%. Almost 2/3 of the folks felt this is needed. Any comments? Let's open it up to comments. Councilmember Baracowoli.
You want me to put my drug dealer hat on or my council hat on?
I want you to put your
I know this is a difficult issue, and it's difficult for me too. I know we've had plenty of discussion on it. It's there. Unfortunately, if we like it or not, it's there, the legalization of it all. So I think the one thing I do question a little bit, and I'm not sure, I probably need more discussion just on this whole church thing, making sure I understand it correctly, that we're just, a church is not a place that is within the distances, correct?
The state doesn't call churches.
Right, we're being consistent with state law.
Right. And how will we determine, you know, when it's, I forgot the term you used, primarily youth, you know, youth services? I mean, are we going to have a difficulty in that? How are we going to go about that? Do we have a clue yet?
Well, I think that if the facility, more than 50% of the time is providing a youth, I mean, that would be primarily, wouldn't it be the majority of the time is providing some sort of youth service?
Yeah, it's kinda.
And youth programs. And we're using the same regulations from the state language, right? Does this come from the?
Yes, we are. We're using the state regulations for the language. And additionally, if there's concerns about that, we do have the planning commission that it would come before anyways, because if they apply for it, they can come and apply, and they would go in front of the planning commission, and they would look at the setbacks. And council has the ultimate authority. It was mentioned earlier about an injunction and because of different setbacks. The council, under California Business and Professions Code 26054(b), has the authority to adjust distances on buffer zones at their discretion. So even though these setbacks are within the ordinance, the council still has final authority and approval to adjust under the Business and Professions Codes to even reduce those buffers even farther on a case-by-case basis. So I think when we look at those different facilities and we're looking at the language, maybe those determinations come up during planning commission and somebody makes the argument of, yeah, we have youth programs here and they're, if they're fighting against a place opening up within those, then we have those provisions in place where those setbacks can be adjusted. So.
Okay. That answers that part for me, okay.
Any other comments related to the ordinances moving forward?
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
Used to be years ago that churches had youth activities. They had facilities that they had basketball, football, baseball, whatever the case may be. It'd be quite interesting to note how many churches actually have youth activities in a consistent, scheduled opportunity for children to play basketball. How many churches have an arena where they can play basketball, badminton, volleyball? And I think that since the state has ruled and made the comment about this recreational marijuana in the church, as long as we follow state regulations and it's not a violation of a moral issue, it's an ethical issue, I say move on with it.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
At this point, I don't see any particular reason why we need to make it a little more restricted than what the state has already done. They put a lot of time. I do appreciate Chief Sachs sharing that we have the ultimate authority to be able to adjust on a case-by-case basis. That is key. I mean, I was a youth minister for 13 years, and so I get it. I mean, we did things at my house on a regular basis, weekly. It was unfortunate that my neighbors decided to illegally grow in the next door backyard, but there wasn't anything I could do about it. It was just a fact of life that we had to contend with. It's unfortunate. I believe that the regulatory actions that the state had put on with cannabis are severely stricter than a business that I run. And so it's one of those things that I don't think we need to necessarily make it more strict on a local level.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Are you wanting all of our comments at this time?
Yes.
Okay, so I
Stephanie?
feel a little
Stephanie,
differently.
could you speak up
Can
a
you
little
hear me?
bit?
Okay, anyway, I got a train and my soft voice, so.
Better. Thank you.
I know we've been looking at the financial impact, that could be a positive financial impact to us to change the ordinance to include adult use, and expand it in the city. But I personally do not think this is a good move for our constituents of our city, for the people who live here, because of the research that shows the adverse effects of increased cannabis use. It's not good for people. The evidence shows that it has a negative effect on health, on people's educational accomplishments, on the workforce. People have increased workplace accidents, absenteeism. They are not motivated a lot of times to get training and education that would make them good workers for our community. The family stability is affected when people increase drug use. And it has a negative effect on all of these things. We want to build our community. That's what my goal is as a council, and I believe our goal is to build and strengthen our community and not to weaken it, not to introduce factors and encourage things that weaken humans. It weakens humans' life. It's dangerous for the very population that is so very attracted to it. It's the most dangerous to people 12 to 25. So a lot of, even when you legalize marijuana, when it becomes more available, more young people are using it. And this will be available to our young people here. Increasing it to adult use will not stop 18-year-olds from going in with a medical card. But this is some research evidence about what happens to young people. Young people aged 12 to 25 have the highest consumption rate of marijuana. This group is under the threshold of a mature brain. Marijuana causes physical changes to the developing brain, reducing cognitive skills, memory, and motivation. It can cause a permanent loss of IQ by up to 8 points, by which moves a student a full category from average to below average. Marijuana users are 5 times more susceptible to suicide and 7 times more susceptible to mental illness. It is a causal factor in psychotic breaks leading to violent acts, mental illness, including schizophrenia, paranoia, bipolar disorder, addiction, birth defects, and impaired driving. All of this translates to more crime, homelessness, academic failure, traffic deaths, and incalculable damage to our environment. We already have. How much of those things that I read on our list are we seeing rampant in our community already? We're dealing with homelessness. We're dealing with people who are out of their minds on drugs, walking the streets, vandalizing properties, stealing out of cars. We just have a huge issue already. And the studies from the hospital, Fremont Rideout Hospital has done studies. Yuba County Health Department has done studies. One of the major issues, number 1 or number 2 on both of those, was drug abuse in our community. And our population of typically lower income, lower educated, are most prone to moving toward a drug, to whatever they want to do with it. But they're more prone to becoming addicted and drug users. One study I have a lot of research that I found that I was not able to prepare in advance for you to read it before now. But one of the characteristics of cannabis use is that it contacts with the same receptor that heroin does, and so it gives it is a precursor to heroin use, can be in susceptible people, and 95% of the heroin users in the study that I have, they were cannabis users first. They were marijuana users first. So it is a gateway drug, if you will. And I just think that we are doing so many things, so many organizations in our community are working to combat drug use and the effects of drug use, people trying to recover from drug use in our community. We have Pathways. We have MYCC, who's working on a drug-free community grant that would provide grant funding for us to be encouraging people to not use drugs. 2 weeks from now at my school, all schools in Marysville Joint Unified are doing the campaign that I'm sure our police department is part of and the sheriff's department are part of, the Say No to, or Red Ribbon Week. It's Red Ribbon Week, encouraging kids to not use drugs. And we're saying as a community during Red Ribbon Week that we want you to grow up to be healthy individuals, community members who can make a significant contribution and be good citizens. We don't want you doing drugs because we know that will ruin your life if you take that path. It has a potential of destroying lives. We just had a very tragic accident in Yuba City, the hit and run, and an 8th grader died. But how much, that is so tragic, and we are all feeling the impact of that. But what about all these kids that are walking around who've been impacted by drugs? They are not going to school, they are not working, they're on welfare, they're living at the river, they're riding their bikes around town, stealing things. We're seeing the living impact of drug use in our community. And it's something significant that I think we need to think about. I don't think every decision that we make as a council for our community can be quantified with a dollar amount. I don't think that you can quantify the effects of high school dropouts, of people losing their lives for drugs, walking around and schizophrenic and suicidal, and all of these things that I've mentioned, driving under the influence. It's a big deal. And the more we're encouraging the use of drugs in our community, because basically, if we are doing this, wanting them to be successful, to get the tax revenue, we're going to see more people using drugs. We're going to see an increase in these kinds of things. And I ask you, gentlemen, is that really what we want to see in our community? And we just had a great example of, we just saved almost $10 million by being smart. Just by being smart. We can save money in other ways, I think. So far this year, we've brought in $135,000, I think, is that right, so far, from the cannabis tax, the Measure F tax, somewhere in that range.
We're projecting around $150,000 by the end of the fiscal year.
By the end of the fiscal year, and possibly doubling that if we expand it to adult use. So that's, what, $300,000. That's pennies compared to what we just did tonight. And I think that there's lots of other ways that we can get that kind of money. We're also paying law enforcement personnel to monitor all of the cannabis activities, so some of that $300,000 will be taken up in salary. I think we're sending a mixed message on this, and I think that we can do better. And I would ask you tonight, I make a motion that we don't make a decision on this tonight. I make a motion that we take time to really think about some of these things. I can get you some of this information that I have been reading so that we can really think about the other impacts to our community that increased cannabis use could produce. And do we really want that? Or do we want to find other ways to create revenue? I think we've been doing a great job on finding those things. And we could probably make more money on parking meters than we could on cannabis tax. So gentlemen, that's my motion. I make that motion that we...
Would you allow me to speak before you make a motion, ma'am?
No, I make the motion. I make a motion that we table this
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
November 5th.
Seeing no second on the floor, I would like to make comments. I think it's kind of unfair to put all the ills of the society on cannabis. I'm not going to have a debate with you, Stephanie, but I think there's adverse effects to everything that we not use correctly, whether that's painkillers or alcohol or whatever it may be, or even other things that we don't do correctly. There's adverse effects for all those things. I think it's important that parenting and family values are taught at home, and that we strengthen our children, our kids, and give them the ability to think for themselves and make good decisions. Anyway, for me as a parent and as an employee of an agency that provides services to young children, I know the effects of illegal drugs and the effects of poverty in our community and the effects of not being able to have a job, not because of illicit drugs or they're alcoholics or they have mental health issues. There's a lot of structural issues in everywhere in our nation that has caused a lot of issues that we have to deal with. Saying all that, the state of California, the voters of California said, yes, let's make this a regulated industry for many reasons. And for me, it makes sense to regulate something that can cause a lot of damage to our young people. By regulating, the hope is that you eliminate the black market because you have the resources available to go after the black market. And you see some of that effect out in Yuba County Hills, where our sheriff's folks are busting a lot of illegal growths out there because they're not being regulated. That's what happens when things become regulated, then we can test them, we can create products that are safe for adults, for recreational use, or for medical use. As we know, cannabis is not just to get high, but there has a lot of other properties that enhance people's life, whether it's pain management or anything else. I think it has a lot of benefits, and I think the state of California has done a really good job in putting together a set of regulations that allows for those to choose whether it's to have a beer or to do anything else. The way to do it is to regulate it. So I'm happy to support this because, one, I think we're doing it this way will keep it away from kids at the high school. We know it exists in the high schools. Our police officers, our police departments, they know that it's out there in the schools, but it's not coming from these vendors that we approved, that we gave licenses to, or we're gonna expand them to be able to expand to recreational use. It's not coming from that because that's not regulated. It's not being tracked. So it exists already, but now with additional resources, hopefully we could combat, the access to our young people. And I truly believe in that. And I believe that, my parenting is also hopefully going to help my son not choose to do that. So I think things do start at home, and it starts, and making sure that we take our kids to church or whatever we want to take folks to make sure that they grow up to be wonderful, productive individuals.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
May I?
Yeah.
We talk about marijuana. One of the biggest contributors to juvenile delinquency and deaths is vaping, the vapor. Now, here's an issue that every kid, I'm saying every kid, but they hide it. On 60 Minutes the other night, they were showing where the teachers were walking through the classroom, and these kids are hiding this stuff in their shirts, and the teachers, out of 14 people, they've recognized 2. That's opiates. If we're going to take off on marijuana, why don't we take off on opiates? That's killing more people than they ever have. And this vaping is killing these kids. It's a known fact. So that's not regulated. And I guess the legislature is taking steps to make sure that that's regulated to the point that they just can't go down someplace and buy it. I'm not going to sit here and lecture it because it's an argument that we're not going to win one way or another. People voted on it. Marysville citizens has never voted on marijuana in the city of Marysville. They voted in the county, not in the city of Marysville. And so it was a county ordinance they voted on and not a city ordinance. So, we've come a long way with this. I don't know that the crime rate has proven to be any higher than what it was before we passed the medical marijuana, medicinal. I don't know that to be true. But I will tell you this vaping is killing kids. And this opiates are killing kids. They're stealing them right out of their parents' medicine cabinets. If you want to get on a campaign to save people, get on that campaign. Thank you, Mayor, and I support this.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make one more comment to this. No matter what side of it you're on, if we don't put some ordinances in place, it's a free-for-all. And everybody can do anything they want. Grow, sell, anything they want to do, they can do if we don't put an ordinance in. Am I not correct, Chief?
That's correct. It's a revision for even our cannabis, or the people that are growing in their backyards. So this allows us to continue that enforcement, and we've already, I think there's 6 code enforcement actions that we've already taken on illegal grows in backyards so far in the last 30 days. So we've ramped up that program. It helps regulate the delivery side because there is people that are delivering. Have weed maps on my phone. There's 2 delivery locations within the city already that would ban those delivery companies from the city. And then the ones that do deliver into the city from outside, they would have to get a permit from us because we're under this guidelines. It's only the dispensaries that are allowed the delivery. So by having the ordinance, it is going to regulate that and then give us some guidelines in order to help continuing to enforce that. As far as the crime activity, it hasn't gone up as far as the dispensaries are concerned, and we haven't received any calls for service there. So they're self-sustained. They've got 24-hour security, armed security, and we have full access to all closed-circuit TVs at those locations for 24-hour monitoring of every square inch of the facility besides any private space, which would be any locker room or restrooms, and there hasn't been any issues at this point.
So just my final point being, if we don't put in some rules, then it's a free-for-all.
It's a free-for-all right now for
We want to
delivery.
put in rules, and we want them to be as stringent or more stringent than the state, and in many places ours is more stringent. So I would have to support it because otherwise, like I say, we have nothing on the thing, so.
Thank you, Chief. Yes?
Well, my understanding is that we do have something, and we already can enforce the illegal grows because that's in the ordinance. We can still enforce. We can already enforce ordinances about illegal grows too much in somebody's backyard because they're allowed 6 plants. So if they exceed that or not doing it in the right way, we can already enforce that. We can manage delivery. We can do that.
No, we can't right now.
Enforce that if we change the ordinance to include that. But we don't have to expand it to adult use in order to accomplish those things. Is that right?
May I respond to that? Sure. You know, since we're just sitting here discussing this, if you remember when we passed the ordinance for home grow, we had that so restrictive that as nobody could ever grow a marijuana plant in their backyard. You think about that, and I don't think that's being enforced today. There's no building that I know of in Marysville that has air conditioning or filtration systems in their backyard to grow marijuana.
They have to get a permit, right?
It can't be attached to the house. We haven't rescinded that yet. That's still in the ordinance. And so, you know, I think once you start that, I think that opens up a lawsuit because I don't think a person that's renting can afford to build a structure outside the house so they could grow 6 plants.
We're currently enforcing it right now. We've just did 6 code enforcement actions in the last 30 days on illegal grows in the city for not following the ordinance. And what we do is we're notified of the grow. We go knock on the door. I've been at 4 out of the 6. We inform them of our ordinance, provide them a copy, and then we give them 48 hours to comply. They need to come back and notify us that they have mitigated so we give them 48 hours to comply. One of them had a very large operation, so I think they had 5 days to comply or to start to comply. What they do is they have to notify us in order to say it's corrected. So for a re-inspection, because when their time limit is up, we go by the ordinance and we start assessing a lien and fines on their property and assessing their property. So once they see that, they've all 6 of them have been mitigated and removed.
So I understand you're saying that they lay a slab out there that has it attached to this water treatment, and they have aeration systems not attached to the house. They have buildings outside, as the ordinance says they should have. Is that so? What I'm
removing them? Their grows. What I'm saying is we're notified of those grows that are happening in the backyards, and they're non-compliant as to our code. Okay. There's nobody that's conforming to the code that we're aware of that has the outbuilding with all the filtration stuff. But we're being notified of the ones that are out of compliant, that have them out in the open, and those are the ones that we've enforced, and they have actually eradicated and removed all plants from those properties and became compliant during our re-inspections.
So they're open grow, they're not enclosed grows.
Well, some of them are open grows and some of them are enclosed because they have, either whether one of them was like a makeshift greenhouse tent. Okay. That's not in compliance and it had to be removed. So once they see the ordinance and they see the penalties of the ordinance, they have no problem complying and removing those items.
Good.
So at least so far.
But one of the things, though, when you say that there's, with this control, if we don't, I'm more concerned about the deliveries that are going to be coming in. None of those we have no ordinances or regulations on any of the deliveries so if we don't do something, anybody at any time can deliver to any house. So that's what I'm talking. I'm not talking specifically about growing.
I think what Stephanie Stephanie's saying is she's not supporting the expansion of to recreational to our dispensaries. I think she's probably fine with tagging the delivery folks and then assuring that folks can't grow stuff in their backyard. I think that's what I heard from Stephanie, so, let's, why don't we make a motion and a second, and then we can continue discussion if we want. Is there a motion to waive the first reading for both replacing Chapter 510 licenses and business regulation for commercial cannabis activity for adoption November 5th, and waiving first reading and review of ordinance amending Chapter 1867 commercial cannabis activity for adoption on November 5th? Is there a motion for that?
I make a motion as read.
I'll second.
Motion and second, so we can continue discussion. There's no further discussion. I want to make sure that this is a waiver reading. If it's not unanimously, then our clerk will have to read both ordinances. On the second reading, and then when we adopt it, at that point, if you are against the ordinance, that might be a good time to vote no. You can vote no now and allow the clerk to read all these pages. So with that, I'd like to, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Hear none. We waive the reading. Nicole's happy.
Look at it. You remember when?
Do you want to read the title only?
So, that was big, even if you're against the motion. Waive the reading. Yeah. Just because you don't want to shoot.
Mayor, are you asking us to read the title of the ordinances or
Correct,
the
correct.
closed session? Okay. You need-
I believe it's just ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 510 licensed business regulation for commercial and cannabis activity. And the second one is ordinance amending Chapter 1867 commercial cannabis activity.
Is it sufficient that you just read it, Mayor, or would you like us to reread it?
It is sufficient that someone has just read it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I heard you.
So let's move to,
Closed session. No? Oh, I thought it was.
what's that? Motion's been voted on, 5-0. Yes. Yes. Now I would like to motion to introduce both of those ordinances. Is there a motion to introduce for second reading?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved with the vote of 5-0. So let's, okay. Committee reports. No committee reports. Any council correspondence?
No, she said no.
No, Mayor, not at this time.
She's just happy she didn't have to read the ordinances. City manager report.
I have no report.
Council comments, Mr. Buttercole.
No reports, no comments.
Mr. Simmons.
No comment.
Mr., what's your name?
Brad
Hudson?
Hudson, yeah. No comment.
Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to say I am so excited about saving almost $10 million, and I just wanted to thank Marty, Brant, everybody else who worked on that. I don't think Bud's still here, but amazing job. So thank you very much. That's a big accomplishment for us. So thank you.
She's a moneymaker.
Some of us will be attending the League of Cities next week. So thank you for moving that meeting from Tuesday to today. So be, I believe Hudson and McKinsey and myself will be traveling down to Long Beach.
Will?
Yeah.
All in the same car?
No.
I think that's about it.
You go.
There's a fall festival at St. Joseph starting at 9 a.m. Come on down on Sunday if you're interested in, and they're dunking the mayor about 1 o'clock. So McKinsey, this is your chance. Yeah. Anyway,
Dunk the mayor.
we're going to move to closed session, but just want to let the folks know that we'll be adjourning today's meeting in memory of Rosalinda Franco and Karina Paz Smith, who both tragically passed away in the city of Marysville this last month, to our next meeting. So we'll go to closed session. Any public comments on closed session? Yes, sir.
Your next meeting will be the first Tuesday of...
We'll return to the first Tuesday, November 5th, yes. So if there's no public comment pursuant to our government code section, GC 54957.6, we'll participate in the two areas A and B. But before we go to closed session, you guys can take a couple minutes if you